I called this residency Coming from Radio Heaven because I have literally come from Radio Heaven, and this has become a Radio Heaven space for the last 2 weeks. It's been amazing. These radios, like this Oceanic, it's a French radio. Maco radio here. These are both other ones I'm going to show you around. They're all thanks to a wonderful man called Bas Bossenade of Bossenade Lightworks, who lives in the Netherlands, and he's been mentoring and helping Bart and myself with miniature museum electronics over the last few years. And he's got an incredible collection of radios in his huge attic of his workspace and school. And he let us rummage around. There's a sound piece you can hear that I've made about that, and it's when we first discovered them 2 years ago. So this summer we went back and he let us borrow and restore a whole load of these radios so that we could start incorporating them into soundscaping and theatre show and experiments. So this is, that was Radio Heaven, and I'm putting it together here in a way to celebrate radios and sound and the history of all this kind of beautiful textures and qualities of, you know, these very, not that long ago, you know, the first thing that really opened up people's access to other things around the world. And it's amazing since starting this project how it just, as soon as people see a beautiful old radio, their memories come pouring out, and that kind of fascination with the tangibility and the ethereality of the tuning and finding and discovering this kind of sounds through the airwaves. I mean, this actually isn't a radio that's a medium wave radio. This one's been adapted specially, thanks to Bas and Bart, to scroll through the dial and at a certain point it's our tunable radio, so I can put different sounds in the story into it.
These tuning things that represent the whole world, that's great about it. Imagine when radio was quite new still, it would give you the feeling you could listen to the whole of the world.
And it's that sentiment. There's something about the radio dial and tuning in and hearing some crackling sounds that just touches everybody. And now I'm working with these radios. They have got this incredible sound and tone, and we're working with how to project bits of a theatre show, working with Jonny Fluffypunk. He's got a show called Test Transmission from the Edge of the World, which was written for the Radio Hut, which, if you zoom around over to there, you'll see through the window. And this little Radio Hut has been travelling around. It was built in Amsterdam, and it's been to various places, and it's an installation, a place for people to sit, a place to record conversations, and it's also places for theatre show. So what we've been developing in this space now is working out how to transmit different sounds to different radios so that they can make a kind of three-dimensional soundscape, and they can perform the characters in the story of the theatre show as well, which is about radio. So that I would just give a little explanation of a few of them. My miniature museum background means that we study a subject and we get completely absorbed in it, and it's just become all things radio and sound history over the last couple of years, among other projects. And this, for example, this one is a Maco radio that was made to set into a cabinet, and it's just such a wonderful combination of materials. This bits of colourful dial and wood, this metal. Over here, this radio is one that is wired up to play sounds through, but there are others that we're using which are old valve radios which still work, which I'm transmitting to. And the reason it's got a number on is it's part of my experiment, so I know which one I'm turning the volume up and down from remotely. Covered in, it's got this beautiful copper grill around it. This is a favourite, well, they're all favourites, very hot. You can hear the buzz of it. Philips radio. A lot of the radio are Philips because Philips was made in the Netherlands, and there's a good collection of them there. This one, it's kind of like reminds me of a sort of deco cinema front. And at night time it really glows up. You can see the glow of the light coming up through this clear plastic. And it also casts shadows with sunlight dying. So some of these sounds I've been recording as well, and they're part of the kind of aesthetic of the soundscapes and little bits of sound effects. So I'm recording these mixtures of twiddles and sounds and static, picking things up and incorporating them into the sound pieces. But I'm also transmitting to them from small, really small, short-range transmitters. So there's voices and other things which I'm deliberately getting through there. Not right now, but this. It's been really lovely to be in a space like this, which is interesting that you're moving more in SVA. SVA is moving more to having more kind of residencies here and a sort of process-based space, because you've got this lovely combination of a kind of white cube gallery with huge windows and this sort of beautiful framing of whatever you're doing. And the goldfish bowl effect of kind of being visible from the street and being somebody who's actively busy with something, which people really love seeing behind the scenes. I mean, I've noticed that from miniature museum installations that we make, that when we've had things on display with bits of electronics and how they work, we've been there kind of gathering at the same time and describing what we're working on. People feel so more involved just naturally, and I think this curiosity of just, seeing anyway there seems to be a kind of fascination with the radios and the entrails and the antennas, and somebody was mentioning how, considering it was lockdown, they loved seeing the fact that there were a couple of chairs here, even though when it was an empty space and I wasn't even in here, there was something that felt like something conversational is happening in here, and that's something about the nature of the exhibit, I suppose, as well. It's about sound and communication. But it's fantastic for lockdown as well, because there are a few people walking the streets. There's a lot more on a Saturday for the market. And so it's given me a kind of peace in which to work without being disturbed, because I get quite distracted. So I'm actually quite grateful that I've not been able to have visitors coming in and out, but also grateful that I've got this beautiful place, been able to document, and that people are seeing something like, it glows at night. I've left the radios on, the red on-air light from the hut is glowing, so anybody who is walking the streets has got some sign of something interesting happening. And in the days, I've put these small intercom speakers at the side windows all the time, and had little bits of sound bleeding onto the street. And there have been these great moments where people have been hanging around waiting in the falafel shop queue opposite and then coming over and just listening, you know, to these ambient sounds, bits of NASA, sonar, mixes. And Radio Freenio was, which is a sound art radio station transmitted from Glasgow for 2 weeks a year, coincided with this residency for a large part, which was brilliant because it's all about that, and the stuff that they're transmitting is fantastic. So I've also been playing that out the windows and feeling like I'm connected to a wider kind of sound art radio scene and aesthetic going on here, and people are kind of hearing it in different dimensions, hearing it and seeing that kind of vibe activity. The radiophonic hut. Buzzing. Hundreds, just after 1200. Between 1200 and 1300. You got that? So this is also an experimental station when it can't be a place for other people to come and sit, but for the rest of the time in the past and hopefully in the future it's somewhere where people can come and sit, hang out, listen to things, be interviewed, and it's a very cosy little hut that just, yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely having people in here. Hopefully we'll come back soon. In the meantime we transmit from it. Presenting a live stream through Knaïve Theatre, presents a Digital Lyceum, was another thing where you realise that you know, just negotiating what was going to happen with the internet in this space and sound editing and working on stuff when you can't have all of those things running smoothly or your team all together. It's just another little juggle of stuff, but we all managed. It was fantastic. And we had Jonny on Zoom in the radio hut, and I was in here. Maco was in Eastbourne. We ended up having this question and answer session and streaming a presentation of stuff that we'd been editing kind of through the distance and in here. Yeah, the acoustics of the space are really interesting in here as well because it's a bit echoey. That's also had its own effects of just sort of amplifying different sounds. And when we were capturing things with a binaural microphone, the day sound from Knaïve Theatre came to capture it, Jonny was able to practice some recording here and move around the binaural mic. So we've had this mixture of filming and recording. It's interesting to see the visual aspect of moving around something like a binaural microphone and then seeing how it is when you hear it back. So yeah, just lots of great acoustic experiments really. Part of what we've been doing on this residency, which was always part of the plan, was to work out how to run workshops to do with radios and sound, and it's just happened very organically. It's great. There's a young artist collective called the Mould Collective who come to SVA, and they work in the studio upstairs of Milligan Beaumont, Millie, who's a fashion and textiles designer, and I'd seen some of the beautiful, colourful things that they'd been making with her. So apart from doing some sound practice-based stuff, I'll explain in a minute, I offered them this old radio that was actually being thrown out, which I rescued a couple of years ago. It's a kind of radio gramophone, and it was looking all quite flaky. And for a while I've been wanting to turn it into some kind of miniature radio lounge in the back amongst the valves. and just decorate it. And this was just a beautiful project for them, and they ran with it, and they've just gone wild. It's fantastic. They've embroidered and totally blinged it up and done little kind of engravings around the side. But the very exciting thing, which has been capturing everybody's attention in the window, probably knocked over half of the teacups now, is this wonderful miniature radio lounge. People have been really pouring through the window at this, and what's great about this as well is that we're working with the sound with them. So we've been having workshops where they've been collecting bits of noise, and they've been creating mock interviews between the characters on the sofa.
Okay, so our first guest is
Batman. Right, sorry, yeah. Hi, Batman. I'm actually being a little nervous. It's like you in the flesh. You've done so much good.
Hi. You know, I'm just a regular. You know, I'm really happy to be here. Sorry about that. I don't know what came over me.
So we actually brought you into the studio to talk about your new autobiography, Batman.
Yes.
And his darkest nights.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because you're one of the first superheroes to have gone down that route.
And we're also going to be working with Jonny does jingles, so the idea for our radio show and theatre is to get the audience making up their own jingles, so that's something that we'll work with too, so they can, and it kind of gives a basis and a confidence to animate, to make a kind of little miniature radio stations and funny sort of spoof in the style of old style radio ads. So they've just really run with that in a brilliant way and improvising all these conversations. And also with the sound and the mixing stuff, once they came in and I could explain to them what was happening with just basically DJing through old radios and other sounds, and that they could go away and record their own things, and we can play it through these radios and mix it up and record it. They're excited about that too. So we've yet to bring all those sounds together and play with that. We're going to do that after lockdown, when we can get back together in a bigger space, and then probably set it up in the bar and let them jam with old radios and microphones and record it, put it in here. People can listen through headphones or just sit with it. So yeah, Mould Radio Lounge, fab, psychedelic. Come and see it. It'll go on exhibition somewhere else along the way as well. We'll take it and show it other places. The other lovely thing is that there are artists who are coming to work and use their studios in isolation. So you still have this feeling of, I mean, it's lifted my spirits during lockdown because I am able to work here, and I've been doing all my work at home all year, and I see, you know, I know that there's other people in their little pods and they can see me through the window, like this kind of goldfish bar. Yeah, it's lovely. Thank you, SVA.